Welcome to the show, guys. Week 4 starts and sits. This is a huge episode here for you to make sure you guys get prepared for fantasy football week 4. A must win for many people. Need to save their league. Now, I know if you guys are 16 rounders, you're doing pretty good. I know Josh Allen's carrying me, Jim. I got Barkley, I got Henry, been doing well, but you want to listen, guys. We're going to go through every position, give you the optimal starts, and the guys that have tougher matchups, latest news, everything here for you to get you fully prepped for fantasy football week 4. Jim, welcome to the show, man. Excited to dive in.
Hey, counselor. I'm getting ready for week 4. I had a bad week 3, man. Bad week 3. I need to recover. I need to come back and get some wins, man. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we got
a lot of injuries. I'm dealing with a lot of injuries right now.
We got a lot to cover, and there's been a lot of inconsistencies, which we're going to highlight here as we go through each position, especially some of these guys, you know, that everybody drafted high, including Anthony Richardson, just not panning out at all. So even like guys like Tyreek Hill, we're going to talk about that. Tyreek Hill, I think he's had under, 7 points the past couple weeks. He's been brutal. So we're going to talk about that, everything. So if you guys are new to the channel, smash it, tap it, slap it. Guys, I've linked it below. Also, join the Counselor's Edge to get all my NFL picks of the week. Counselor's Edge below. Hit the thumbs up and drop a question below. I want to make this interactive. Drop a question below, guys. Emphasize it. I want to emphasize I love being interactive. I try to get to as many questions as I can. So drop your questions below. If you want your question guaranteed to be answered, again, join the front lines as well. Patreon.com/FF Counselor. But we'll try to get to as many questions as we can below. All right, Jim, I'm ready to dive in. Where is Breaking Brad?
We now have breaking news.
I want to highlight a couple of some news and notes here, Jim. Nothing, too crucial, too important, but Russell Wilson, calf, has not been ruled out, but apparently Justin Fields is preparing to start. Now, what do we do in this situation if you're the Steelers? I mean, they're winning. They're 3-0 with Justin Fields. If Russell Wilson comes back healthy, are you leaning on your starter, or are you just going to roll with Fields moving forward? What would you do, Jim, as a coach?
I mean, as long as Fields is winning, you keep playing him. I mean, that's what I would say. I'd say Wilson's not going to have his chance unless Fields just falls apart. So,
yeah,
you know,
think, yeah,
he's Fields is playing very much game manager football. He's not turning the ball over. He's making smart decisions. It's a low-scoring offense anyway. Grind it out on the ground and win with your defense. That's how they're winning right now. So, as long as it's working, keep going with it.
Yeah, I mean, and defense has been really good, and they've been keeping them in games. So I would assume that that's a big part of it. I wouldn't assume that. I would say that is a big part of it. Watt is a menace out there, man. I've got actually 2 top 10 defenses in one of my leagues because we were able to have a lot of bench spots. I'm able to get Pittsburgh and Buffalo, so I've been rotating them based on matchup. I've been looking really, really good in a big money league, so it's been looking good. Other news here, I want to talk about CeeDee Lamb. His ankle's been bothering. He did practice full again yesterday on Tuesday. Washington Commanders news here. Austin Eckler on concussion protocol. I don't know, did you see the concussion hurt, like how bad that hit was? What pulled out Eckler? I didn't see that. I don't know.
I didn't see it either.
Yeah.
So.
He's under concussion protocol. Skylar Thompson will be evaluated early. His ribs were bothering him. These guys are a disaster. I mean, again, we're going to talk about Tyreek Hill's value there. Evan Ingram's hamstring is questionable to play Houston in week 4, according to Doug Peterson. Kareem Hunt was signed to the active roster. So Carson Steele owners, I don't know what to tell you, man. You've got a new kid in town here, so that could be an issue there. Do you care for Kareem Hunt at this point in his career? I have no stock in these guys.
Not at all interested. I don't. Hey, I'm looking out my window right now. I'm seeing a coyote just hanging out in my front yard right now. He's running away.
Yeah, but
I love that. Where's the rest of his family? There's like 6 of them. They've been hanging out together, and I only see the one. Maybe I'll see more in a little bit. So
don't run out. He'll probably bite you, Jim. He might bite you if you get out there.
No, they're actually very timid. They run away whenever they see humans. So it's just pretty good. Yeah.
Heard a couple of coyote attacks before, but I don't think it's unless you provoke them. I would assume, right? Or they're hungry.
Yeah, I mean they're just very timid. They just run away when they see people. So
right. Well, nothing else in the news here that's really jumping out at me. Oh, that Keon Coleman thing I want to talk about here. I was so pissed, man. Like, I don't know if you watched that game. Like, he was on, I think the week 1, he was like 73% of the snaps. Week 2, he's out there for 90%. Like, he's on the field a lot. And then I'm watching the game, and I'm seeing Marquise Valdez-Scantling on this field, and I'm seeing Mac Hollins. I'm like, what's going on, right? And then I'm pissed. I do this video, I'm pissed. All of a sudden, it's like, you see the play, snap, in the air, Josh Allen in the air, and it's a Keon Coleman touchdown. I'm like jumping. I'm like, what the heck? So apparently they were disciplining Keon Coleman. I'm like, what the heck, man? Apparently he's been tardy. I don't know whether he didn't show up to practice. They didn't get too much. The coach didn't get too much into it, but it was disciplinary action. And the one play he comes out on or whatever, he looks really good. So I would assume that this lit a fire under him, Jim. I don't know. That's weird.
Hopefully. Luckily, you got that touchdown.
yeah, I needed that, man. That won my week.
But I mean, he should have had a bigger week. When we saw how big a week that Josh Allen had with 4 touchdowns, it should have been a bigger week for Coleman. It was very disappointing that he only had the 1 target. So
I was reading a report saying Josh Allen saying, "Oh, he's so glad that his players don't worry about stats and stuff like that." And it's like, okay, well, that's not good. Well, it's good for Josh Allen because I got Josh Allen everywhere. If he spreads the ball around, gets a ton of touchdowns, great. But you're looking at a team that's probably going to spread the ball around unless Keon Coleman just starts getting keyed on Keon Coleman at this point. Very, very frustrating as a Keon Coleman owner. But again, we're talking 9th round draft capital. Got me 9 points. Got more than I think Tyreek Hill got the past 2 weeks in one snap. That shows you how much ceiling there potentially is if he just keys on Keon. So something to note, something to talk about. I know a lot of people asking about the Keon Coleman stuff. I wanted to talk about that. Okay. All right, Jim, let's go to the optimal plays at each position, starting off with the quarterback. I'm going to pull up a visual here for you guys. Let's start talking about this, Jim. I'll just list off, you guys in the comment, list off the optimal starts at each position here based on matchup. Now, again, if you guys have, like, I see Caleb Williams with the second easiest matchup versus the Rams. Now, if you have a better start, right, like he's got an easier matchup than Josh Allen, you don't go ahead and start Caleb Williams over Josh Allen. This is a point of reference, guys. This is good for DFS. This is good for making starts and decisions. If you're torn or if you're looking at waiver wire, it's a lot of extra insight for you. So Kyler Murray versus Washington, good matchup. CJ Stroud having a weird game last week, 12 points versus Jacksonville. I mean, Jacksonville got torched last week. Good matchup. Caleb Williams, Daniel Jones, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence against Houston. Good match. Only 10 points last week. He's looking for a bounce back week after that embarrassment. Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Jaden Daniels, 28 points last week, and Derek Carr coming off a bad week. 2 good first weeks, coming off a bad week with 9 points last week. Derek Carr versus Atlanta. Good matchup. Jim, what do you think of these guys here? Are these guys real pretenders? Like guys like Trevor Lawrence, man, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I got to say, looking at the defenses right now, and we're starting to, now it's been 3 weeks, you kind of have a much better idea about how good these defenses are. And you talk about like the Commanders or the Rams or the Jags or the Texans, they are top 4 for opposing quarterbacks. They just give up the points. Like the Commanders, over 260 passing yards, average of 3 touchdowns per game. That's how much they're averaging against them. Quarterbacks are scoring on average 29 fantasy points against the Commanders. So if you've got the quarterback that's played against the Commanders, play him. I mean, for sure. Same with the Rams, same with the Jags, Texans, Panthers. These are the best matchups for your quarterbacks. So go with it,
Okay, Jim, based on some of the guys we talked about, though, I mean, CJ Stroud having a bad week this week. Now he's playing Jacksonville. I mean, we should be looking at an explosive game out of this offense. Nico Collins, Diggs, I'm imagining they're all going to get involved.
Should be good, man. Jags are top 3 for quarterbacks. So, yeah, absolutely no question you want to play him this week. Last week was a much, much tougher matchup because they played the Bills, right? I mean, that was last week's matchup. Bills are top 6 against the quarterback position.
Right.
Quarterbacks are averaging only 11 fantasy points against the Bills this season. So no wonder he had a terrible, terrible game. It should be much better this week. So,
like I said, Daniel Jones, good matchup. Some people asking, like, can I pick up Daniel Jones off the waiver wire? I'm struggling with Anthony Richardson. That's a good question, actually. So a lot of people asking me, like, there's like Darnold on the bench, right? They've got Daniel Jones, free agency, right? I would, at this point, especially when I pull up, I'm going to pull up a second, the sits of the week, or the guys that have tougher matchup, I would say. I would, at this point, bench Anthony Richardson. I don't trust him, Jim. I don't trust a guy throwing 2 to 3 interceptions a game. Like, I'm picking up Daniel Jones, who's now been connecting with neighbors, or maybe a Darnold. Wouldn't you, Jim? Would you be starting Anthony Richardson at this point?
I absolutely would not. The Richardson's playing against the Steelers.
Yes.
Steelers number one against quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are
right.
only averaging 8.3 fantasy points per week when they play the Steelers defense. So do not play Anthony Richardson this week. It's a bad situation for him.
And let me pull that up here for you guys, just to give you guys a point of reference to, reconfirm. So the software is showing here, Anthony Richardson, hardest matchup versus position, coming off a 7-point game last week. You can see it here. Again, I don't trust him. He had a good week 1, but he's got it done on the feet or whatever. You got Matt Stafford versus Chicago. A couple other guys. Bo Nix had a decent week. He's playing the Jets this week. Going to be tougher. Jared Goff versus Seattle. Pat Mahomes, who has not been played up to his standards. 5th hardest matchup versus position. Lamar Jackson. I mean, you don't sit Lamar Jackson and Pat Mahomes, but you just need to be aware. Like, Lamar Jackson is playing Buffalo. It's going to be a slightly tougher matchup, right? Jordan Love, tough matchup if he comes back versus Minnesota. Will Levis, again, very hard to trust. You're not starting Will Levis. Kirk Cousins versus Saints, not going to be the easiest walk in the park. Aaron Rodgers versus Denver. Sam Darnold, if you guys are wondering about him, 11th hardest matchup versus position versus Green Bay. So again, this is just, guys, like a point of reference. You need to be aware if you're making starts and sits decisions, but at this point, I'm sitting Anthony Richardson moving forward. Guys like Bo Nix, guys like Will Levis, very, very hard to trust, not guys that you want to completely trust, moving forward. You want to, that's what I said in 60 rounds. Anchor your team with Josh Allen. I was looking at those, round 2 to 3 wide receivers, the Ayuks of the world, right? Nico Collins as well. I still don't trust him, but again, he's been doing well. Last week, not the greatest. There's a lot of question marks in those early rounds. Just anchor. Josh Allen has been a staple to my teams. He's really been helping me. And I'm just happy to have him. He's just a blessing. In a year of so much uncertainty, Jim. So much uncertainty in every position.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to running backs here, Jim. Let's go right to running backs. I'm going to pull up a screen here with the running backs, and we're going to pull up the optimal running backs. So running backs, again, you want to be consistent here. Just a couple quick guys, good matchup. Devin Singletary, 20 points. He would have had more if he had
Singletary's going to be great this week.
Yeah,
Cowboys number one for opposing running backs, man. Running backs are averaging 32 fantasy points against the Cowboys team this season per game. 32 fantasy points per game. That's a smash start. Singletary.
They've been brutal, man. Absolutely brutal. The Cowboys and all facets of the game. Tony Pollard here, great matchup versus Miami. He had a dud last week, 6 points. Who else is here? Jerome Ford, Cleveland versus Vegas. Your guy, Zach Moss, Jim, 21 points last week. And good matchup versus Carolina, although Zamir White crapped the bed. It was terrible against Carolina. Joe Mixon, good matchup. I think he might be back. And if so, he'd be splitting probably with Cam Akers, who only had 10 points last week. Saquon Barkley, great matchup as well. Brian Robinson Jr., great matchup. Devin Achane, great matchup. And
especially with Eckler out. Eckler's going to be out. So, yeah, it's even better for Robinson. Yeah.
Good point, yes. Raheem Mostert, I think he's going to be banged up still. Devin Achane.
He's not playing.
Yeah. We got Devin Achane, good matchup. Kyron Williams, great matchup. Some people asking, should we? And Stevenson, a good matchup. Those are some good matchups there. We'll get to the rough matchups in a second. But at this point, some of people asking, Blake Corum, guys like Blake Corum, Trey Benson, such great talent in college, could be starters on any team. At this point, man, I mean, they're very just injury dependent. Connor's got to go down at this point, unfortunately, for Trey Benson, and Kyron Williams has to go down for Blake Corum for these guys to be relevant, Jim. It's just not happening for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it just hasn't really appeared yet. But there are guys that have started to emerge, like Bucky Irving has had a really strong early season. Ty Johnson's been pretty good. And these guys are getting more work. So I mean, there are some things there. But now top 5, and here's something that you might want to consider, man. You're talking about how you're out on Zamir White. Who are the Raiders playing this week? Darn it, I just had it up. Oh, they're playing the Browns. Yeah. Oh, that's not a great matchup. Never mind. I'm sorry. I was looking at it the wrong way. The Raiders right now are one of the best teams to play your running backs against. So I guess we're saying start the Browns running backs this week because they are going to be huge. Cowboys, Raiders, Dolphins, Panthers, and Jags are the top 5 teams to start your running back against.
Yeah.
The top 5 hardest would be the Lions, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Vikings, and the Chiefs. So those are the ones where you want to have to make some decisions about when to start your running back.
Yeah, so I've got here Kenneth Walker, tough matchup. Well, he's bagged up anyway. Zach Charbonnet, I got him against Detroit. You guys can see a visual. Alvin Kamara, a little bit tougher versus Atlanta this week. James Cook versus Baltimore's rush defense, tougher. James Cook's been lighting it up. I was wrong on him. Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson, a little bit tougher versus Minnesota. J.K. Dobbins, again, I told you, Jim, don't draft Gus Edwards. And Gus Edwards has been absolutely crap in the bed. He's got a 600th matchup versus KC's rush defense. Kareem Hunt, Carson Steele, a little bit tougher versus Chargers this week. Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery versus Seattle, not the easiest matchup, but those guys, obviously, you got to start them. Byjan, 11th hardest matchup versus position versus the Saint. And like I said, Zamir White, pretty tough matchup. 13th hardest versus position versus Cleveland. And Jordan Mason, obviously got to start him, but New England, mid-range matchup. And Zeke Elliott, again, mid-range matchup, just to give you guys some context here, just so you can see it visually here. Taylor, also a tougher matchup versus Pittsburgh. I mean, Taylor had a good week last week. Be cautious with Taylor, but I mean, you got to start him. I mean, he's your starter. Guys like Kamara, Taylor, tougher matchups. James Cook, but you don't sit those guys. You got to start them, Jim. You got to move with those guys. So again, this is what I tell you guys: the importance of having those running backs, man. Early round running backs, they are making a difference this week. And you got wide receivers that are crap in the bed, Jim. Absolutely crap in the bed. Tyreek Hill. We're gonna get to Tyreek. What do you think of Tyreek Hill? 2 bad weeks. Hey guys, just want to take a quick break to tell you to head on over to mybookie.ag. This is the place I go to enhance my game watching experience. Head on over there right now, guys. Use code FFC and you get 100% match deposit. It's like playing with their house money, guys. It's absolutely amazing, guys. Go over there right now for spreads, for bets, for everything. mybookie.ag. The code you want to use is FFC upon sign up. Again, you get 100% match deposit up to $1,000. This is amazing, guys. Get in on the action right now. mybookie.ag. Football is back. I'm telling you guys, once you guys get in on this, it's going to enhance that game watching experience. mybookie.ag. The code is FFC. That's for fantasy football accounts, sir. Upon sign up to get all the perks, go create an account right now, put in your first deposit, and take advantage of this amazing deal. Let's get back to the show.
Well, again, he doesn't have his quarterback, and the backup sucks, and now it's a third string quarterback. They really need to get someone in there. They need to sign someone to get them in there to just give them something. I don't know what they need to do, but what they have right now is not sufficient at the quarterback position, and that's what's killing Tyreek right now. It's a shame. Waddle too. They're both very, very disappointing. So,
all right, let's get to that here. So I'm going to pull up here the wide receivers here at each position. And man, so let's start off with the easy matchups. Marvin Harrison, great matchup versus Washington. We got DJ Moore, great matchup versus the Rams. You could see here. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, Jim. I mean, that's a bit of a disaster here because you think that Mike Evans is the one. He is the one, but Godwin's been eating. Like, what do you tell Mike Evans owners?
I would start him. His usage has been good. It's just he's been blanketed with coverage with tough matchups. Eagles top 3 for wide receivers. I think Evans is going to bounce back very strongly this week. We're going to see some good performance out of him.
Khalil Shakir. This is the thing. Khalil Shakir versus Baltimore, decent matchup. I don't know. I'm debating on starting Coleman. Like, is he going to be disciplined this game? I don't know, Jim. Is Keon Coleman going to be disciplined? This is what I hate about coaches. Like, they go ahead and make these decisions without notifying the fantasy community. It's a big problem.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the Ravens here on the list to see how their defense is against receivers. I'm not seeing them.
Well, I got him as.
Why am I not seeing them?
I got him as a third against receivers. Or not? They play him a little lighter. So the algorithm here is showing they've got the third easiest matchup versus position.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, very. The Ravens are very good for opposing wide receivers. So yeah definitely, I would start Shakir. I'd probably start Coleman.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't see Marquise Valdes-Scantling taking the field this week. Other guys, Calvin Austin having the game of his life. George Pickens should emerge. George Pickens versus Indy, good matchup here. DK Metcalf, great matchup versus Detroit. Jalen Polk and Damari Douglas. Damari Douglas coming alive last week. I would, if you need a flex play or desperate, Maybe Demario Douglas versus San Fran. They tend to play wide receivers a little lighter. Nico Collins, obviously, Stephon Diggs must start. Tank Dell, I think they're all going to eat this week. Bounce back week for those guys. Jerry Jeudy, man, I mean, good matchup versus Vegas. Do you start him? I don't know, man. Him and Amari Cooper.
Only if you absolutely need to. I don't think Judy's anything more than maybe a bye week flex play. I wouldn't trust him in my regular lineup.
No. Brian Thomas Jr., I just must start every single week. Again, playing Houston, good matchup here. Jamar Chase had a great week last week, couple tutties, looking great. Again, this is where, do you start on? He's getting work, man. It's surprising, but Andre Isovas, I call him.
Oh yeah, he is getting work than he. Yeah, I think it's just because mostly T. Higgins has been banged up. T. Higgins missed the first 2 games. He played week 3, but they're easing him back in. I would expect that Andre's role is going to shrink as T. Higgins gets healthier. So
Juwan Jennings
would be my choice to start.
And Juwan Jennings, decent matchup as well. I mean, we've got to check out Debo's status here, but I think Juwan Jennings has earned 50 points last week. I mean, I think he's earned himself a starting spot, Jim. I would think.
I think it's just because so many other players were out. Think about it. There's always the 4 receivers in San Francisco, 4 elite receivers. 3 of them were out last week, so it was just Ayuk that was out there along with Juwan Jennings. But if one of those other guys comes back, Juwan Jennings gets pushed down the totem pole. So his target opportunity is going to shrink. So I don't know if I would trust that, but wait to see what happens with Kittle and Debo. So.
All right, guys that have it in a bit tougher here. Let's go through some tougher, the sits at each position here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously you're not going to sit him. But he is playing Seattle's. They're a little tougher versus position. And Garrett Wilson, I mean, again, you're not going to sit him. But here's the thing. Some people get upset, Jim. They're like, oh, okay, well, I'm playing Garrett Wilson. I got to start him, but he puts up 4 points. So like, okay, he had a tough matchup versus position. And this is why I do this show, because I want to raise awareness that, they do have tougher matchups. Yes, you got to start them. But sometimes it's normal to feel upset if your starter has 2 points, right? But just be aware.
I mean, the only way you would sit those guys is if you do have a better option. Like if you have like Godwin or something like that. Godwin's got a good matchup this week. And if it's a choice between Godwin or Garrett Wilson, I might be inclined to put Godwin in just because it's a really, really good matchup and he's been getting a lot of work. Exactly. So, but that's the only kind of situation where that would be an issue. Otherwise, typically you're in a situation where it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to either start some wide receiver 3 or Garrett Wilson. I'm going to start Garrett Wilson. So, right. I mean, that's where most of us live in fantasy land. So
exactly. All right, pull the screen back up here. Go through this here. Tougher matchups here, just so you guys are aware. Tyreek Hill coming off 2 terrible weeks. Has it in tough versus Tennessee's pass defense. Zay Flowers needs to pick it up. I mean, he's playing Buffalo, not the greatest matchup. 4th hardest versus position. We got, who else here? Rashee Rice has been consistent. You got to start him. I don't care who he's playing. He's playing the Chargers. 6th hardest matchup versus position on paper. Just be aware. Alec Pierce, who had a consistent good 2 weeks, had a fall off. I would sit Alec Pierce this week. Again, it was exciting after the first week, but he is playing Pittsburgh. But that being said, man, he could still be force-fed. And, Pittman draws the top corner, and there's an Alex Pierce show. Like the first 2 weeks, you never know. A.J. Brown, check his injury status here. They're all a little banged up here. I'm getting injury designations for A.J. Brown and Smith. Check your local listings on those guys. I have no stock on those guys. They are playing Tampa Bay. Be aware. 8th hardest matchup versus position. Deontay Johnson, a lot of people excited about him now, picking him off waiver wire if he was available. And 9th hardest matchup versus position versus Cincy. So this is going to be a test for our friend, the Red Rifle, Jim. Are we going to get a 3-touchdown, no interception type game again? I doubt it.
I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't think it is.
Yeah,
I think that was a 1 week wonder. But there's a reason. There's a reason why he has not played. Been a starter in the NFL for years at this point. There's a reason. So he came in relief. He played very, very well week 1. I think now there's a lot of film on him. They're like, okay, now we know how to get him. So I think that's what's going to happen.
It's funny now. The coach. I read a report. The coach was saying like, Andy Dalton's our starter. It's so funny how they just ride the train and like. pump their guys up when they're doing well. It's like, okay, he's your starter. Okay, we'll see how long it continues. Now, another guy that I got to ask, which, I want to just really address, is Sam Darnold. We got to talk about this. Is he fool's gold? I mean, he's been doing well. Like, I mean, not just in fantasy, but in reality, is he, like, I've never had a guy, it's very rare that a guy has had years to wow us, we're not wowed, actually come in and wow us. I just don't know if this is sustainable. I'm still not sold. I'm not buying it yet. We could be wrong.
Yeah, where is that on the matchup? Where is Green Bay against quarterbacks?
Let me pull that up here. I'll tell you how tough his matchup is here in a second. Here, Sam Darnold, where are you here? Sam.
Oh, Packers are 11th overall. Against quarterbacks. They're really tough, man. So I would expect a down game out of out of Darnold. You do occasionally see these washed up, failed quarterbacks come out and have a good season, but it's never anything that's sustainable. And so he's hot right now. He's doing great. I don't know how you could bench him at this point. He's been playing so well, but just know this is a pretty tough matchup for him. This is probably his biggest challenge of the year so far. So,
all right, just to recap, wide receivers, tougher matchup. Amon-Ra, like I said, Garrett Wilson. We talked about Tyreek Hill, Zay Flowers. We talked about Rashee Rice, Alec Pierce, and Pittman have a tougher matchup. A.J. Brown, Deontay Johnson, and Calvin Ridley. I want to say that has a tough matchup. And also Drake London, 11th hardest for his position. Calvin Ridley playing Miami. And then we've got Drake London. He's going to be playing the Saints. So just be aware, because I know a lot of people are going to be like, should I start Calvin Ridley? Had a bad week last week. And I'd be inclined to possibly sit him. But that being said, Will Levis had such a terrible game. And I would say at this point, Mason Rudolph's in the queue here, whoever the backup is there. I don't know, man. I think Levis plays for his life this week too, even though it's the 11th hardest matchup for his position against wide receivers.
Yeah, it's a tough matchup. I mean, Levis isn't very good. He's just not very good. But, I don't know why. Why are we rooting for this guy? He hasn't done really anything to show us that he's a good quarterback.
Do you want me to tell you why I'm rooting for? Well, I'm rooting for him because I'm in a 2 quarterback league, and he's my second quarterback, a super flex.
Oh, okay.
But that being said, in that same league, listen to this. I've got Bijan, I've got Barkley, and I've got Jahmyr Gibbs. So it's like, okay, I'm crushing it, but is it Bijan? Who do I have? I have 7 leagues. I can't keep track, but I know I have Gibbs and Barkley in this league. Who's my other third running? Listen to this league, though, man. I'm crushing it. I had a great week. I had to score like 200 points. I have Barkley, I have Gibbs, and I have, Bijan in that league. And I've got Jordan Mason. So I've got 4 workhorse running backs I'm rocking. Mind you, Kirk Cousins and Levis are my quarterbacks. But at the end of the day, I'm still winning. So that's why I'm rooting for Levis. Okay, that's why I'm rooting for Levis.
Purely selfish reasons.
It's selfish. It's selfish. Absolutely. We're all selfish. Actually, you know what I just thought about? Fantasy football is a super selfish sport, isn't it? It's so selfish.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's ruthless, man. Absolutely.
You get down near the red zone and you're like, throw the ball to that guy. That one right there. No, not that other guy.
It brings out the worst. Now, speaking of brings out the worst, did you see that? I posted that video at viral. Did you see the fight video? I'll show you quick. It was SoFi Stadium. It was the Kittle. It was, I should pull up that video, actually. It's actually funny. I'll put it up on my phone because it's just quicker here. You guys saw it on my clip here. So here's the video here. So I guess this Cup guy with the Cup jersey was fighting the Kittle guy. He's like, hit me. And the Kittle guy took a jab. And I guess the guy's girl jumped. And you can't really see. It's kind of blurry here. But the guy's girl jumped in for him. And she gets clocked, right? So there she gets clocked. And then she goes and fights back. But anyway, the guy that got punched, look, and then he gets knocked out right there. It's kind of blurry. There he goes. But anyway, it was crazy. So you imagine
fans in the world.
Yes, the guy with the Kittle jersey say, "Hey, hit me," and then he gets hit, and then basically there's a whole fight. His girl steps in, and then another guy comes in and knocks him out. It was just a disaster. It was in the nose. It always happens in the nosebleeds for some crazy reason. Anyway, the cheap seats, right? And that's the thing, right? Like
that's what it comes down to. Too much beer.
Well, it's a lot of beer, and then these guys don't have a lot invested in their seats. So, like, you almost wonder if those guys are like casuals to some degree, right? Like, or they just can't pay for an expensive ticket. But I tend to see that the guys that are paying for the premium seats, you pay $500 to $1,000 for a seat. You're not scrapping anything. You don't want to lose that $1,000 seat, right? So, more incentive for them to just be crazy, I guess.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's not necessarily cheap up there in the nosebleeds either. But yeah, I mean, hey, come on, bad behavior, and they're probably all drunk. So there you go. So,
And then when your team's losing, right, or winning or whatever, you're like, the emotions get in, and it's just wild, 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 wild. All right. Anyways, tight end starts and sits here. Let's rip through this, and we'll go through defenses right after. So I'm going to pull up the tight end position here. We'll take a look at the optimal plays first. Again, at this point, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I will give you some optimals here. Will Disley, I'm not starting him. Dalton Kincaid has it in good versus Baltimore here. Mike Gesicki, I mean, he's been having some decent games. I mean, in a world where there's uncertainty at tight end, go ahead and start Gesicki. Kyle Pitts, great matchup. People have been waiting 4 years for him to get going versus the Saints. They play tight ends a little bit lighter. Fryermuth, good matchup. Go ahead and start him. Mark Andrews, good matchup. Likely hasn't done anything.
Boy. I don't know if you could trust that one.
They are playing Buffalo, but the Buffalo, for the tight end, they play him a little bit better, but very, very hard to trust. Him and Likely been crap in the bed. Sam Laporta, some people having doubts about him. Understandably so, he's done nothing. It does have it easier versus
and
Seattle.
He's dealing with that injury. He's got that ankle injury too.
The ankle injury. Yeah. He is playing Seattle here. And then let's go real quickly at the tougher matches. Then I want to just talk about tight end overview here. Hunter Henry, tougher matchup versus San Fran. Be aware. Kate Otten, tougher matchup versus Philly. Just to be aware. Trey McBride, tougher matchup versus Washington. Fifth hardest versus position. Yes, Washington plays him a little tougher. Evan Ingram been banged up here. Got injury designation. Tough matchup versus Houston. So Jacksonville versus Houston. Tight ends tough. And Theo Johnson, 10th hardest matchup versus position. Brock Bowers, mid-range matchup. So again, I just want to talk about, I don't need to bring up a visual here for this. I do want to talk about this, Jim. I'm very blessed to have Jake Ferguson. I think he's going to be consistent all year. That's why I drafted him. And I think Tyler Conklin as a backup as well. Ben Snott ended up dropping him. I just has not been done nothing. I'm surprised. You're a high draft capital guy, didn't get anything done. So you got to learn to pivot, right, with your backup tight ends and make sure you got the right tight end in. But it's been a disaster at the tight end position, especially Laporta.
Yeah, I mean, you want to hear something that's shocking?
What's that?
There's 3 teams: Eagles, 49ers, and Titans.
Yeah.
The opposing tight end has averaged 1 fantasy point per week.
Wow.
1. I mean, this is for me. I've always been the guy. I hardly ever go elite tight end. I just feel it's a wasted pick because their volume's so much lower and their draft capital is always too high. But this is just like, I mean, this is just one of those things where I'm like, man, I might just start streaming tight ends just based on the matchup. Yeah. I think that's a better play than just trying to play your high draft capital tight end in a tough matchup. They're just not doing anything. I'm looking right now, and the even if you go to like the 21st best, so a mid-range matchup, Bears mid-range matchup, right, they've held tight ends to 5 fantasy points per week.
Yeah.
Are you really going to start a tight end against the Bears? I don't think you want to. I mean, I don't know. That's where I'm at with the tight ends, man. It's just abysmal. The tight ends you want to start against the Chiefs, against the Panthers, against the Ravens, the Packers, and the Rams. Those are all good. Those are good plays for tight ends. But it's just like there's not a lot, man. There is very, very few points. And when you compare like tight ends, like the top ranked wide receiver defense, the Seahawks. Wide receivers average 9 fantasy points per week versus only 1 fantasy point for the top ranked tight end defense. So, I mean, it's just like there's no points. There's no points in this position. So I would just go streaming.
Like I look at a guy like Foster and Moreau, right? 14 points week 1, then 0 and 1 after. Like, okay, all right, great. You teased us in week 1 and then you do nothing after. Or a guy like Tyler Conklin puts up 2 points week 1, 2 points week 2, and then like 14 week 3. Like, what is it? What is it? What do we believe? I feel deceived, Jim. I feel like if a tight end has a good week, I'm like, yeah, like you don't want to start him the week after at this point. There's just inconsistencies. I'm looking at all these tight ends. Like I don't see any consistency anywhere. Like maybe that's why I feel like Ferguson's going to give me some consistency. Like even look at Goddard, 7.7 points, 30 points, but he had that big catch and run in that.
Well,
week.
he had a big game because both A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith were injured, right? That's why he had a big game. So that's also, I think, a big part of this. You know, if the lead receivers are hurt, that might be a good time to start the tight end as well.
Or look at Cole.
Got to look at the matchups, man. Only play the tight ends that are going with the best matchups because that's the only way you're going to get any production out of this position. So
Cole Kmet, week 1, 1 point, week 2, 7 points, week 3, 26 points. Like, how do you trust that? Like, mind you, Cole Kmet, like I said, has a good matchup this week, but oh man, it's tough. It's tough. All right, next one here. Let's do optimal defenses here. Jim, do you have a list of the defenses we want to start this week?
Oh, you know what? I
can pull it up.
I was looking at the matchups, and the matchups I liked the best were the Titans, who are at Miami.
Yeah.
The Bengals at Carolina.
Yep. You got it.
The Rams, either the Rams or the Bears, I think are both good defenses to start this week. They're playing each other. And the Cardinals are playing Washington at home. I think those are all good defenses to pick up if you're going to.
You got it bang on here. Let me give you a visual here. So here's what the algorithm says here based on matchups. So we've got the Dolphins versus Tennessee, Titans versus Miami. We talked about that. Raiders versus Cleveland. Raiders at home, not bad. Cowboys versus the Giants could be attractive. I'll mind you, Cowboys -1 points the past 2 games. So just be aware. I guess this is kind of factoring in other opposing defenses playing the Giants, but so Cowboys could. I don't trust them. Texans versus Jacksonville. Browns versus Vegas. Jets versus Denver. You talked about Bengals and Panthers. Man, I mean, and 49ers versus New England could be something there as well. So just some.
Yeah, there's not a lot of offense in New England. So yeah, you can play that.
man, oh man, it's been a while. So yeah, I'm just very blessed this year to have my running backs like Saquon, like Henry. Henry scares me a little bit in the earlier, I think it was the earlier game last week where they're playing Hill a lot. I'm like, oh man, better get Henry out there. So Henry's kind of, carved out his role in this offense, which is good. He's going to get all the goal line work, but it is so satisfying being a Saquon owner this year because you don't got to worry about anybody. Now, even a guy like Byjet, he's getting the work, but I'm starting to see Algier a little bit, not as much as last year, but I'm seeing him. And then even a guy like Breece Hall, I'm seeing quite a bit of Braylon Allen, enough to make me feel like we kind of talked about this because we didn't know the animal that Braylon Allen was. And that's kind of one of the reasons I faded him, right? I was like, I'm not. And I'm very fortunate to have being drafted later in drafts where I missed out on Byjet and Breece. And I just by default was going Saquon. So I've got a lot of Saquon stock. I got a lot of Josh Allen stock, and they've been staples in my team. Hopefully you guys who got 60 rounds have the same staples. Jim, how have your teams been doing here?
I had a great week 1, and then it sucked ever since. So,
bounce back. It's still early.
But the one team that I have Saquon in, I'm winning. So there you go.
Okay. There you go. So we'll bounce back. It is early. So I want to tell everybody, encourage everybody, don't give up. We got this. All right. Make sure at this point, look at the consistency. Go back, watch this video again. Make sure you guys start the right people and drop your questions below. That's it, Jim, man. We covered a lot, dude. We covered a lot.
Yeah, man. Hey, good luck, everybody. Week 4. Let's get some victories.
All right, guys. We'll talk soon. Have a good week.